Hello, my name is Matthew.
And my name is Trisha.
Welcome to our special winter online event, Ragnarok-ing around the Christmas tree, all about the Vikings and their winter pastimes. We are museum educators here at the National Museum of Ireland Archaeology, and thank you all for joining in our online family event.
Today we are going to talk to you about all things Viking, but also talk to you about how the Vikings spent their winters and the different pastimes they had and the games that they played. We are going to play you a video that will tell you more about the Vikings and show you some of the artifacts here in the museum and from our handling collection that tell us more about their pastimes and games. We are also going to show you how to create and play your very own Viking board game at home.
But who were the Vikings? To help us learn more, we have a very short video to introduce the Vikings in Ireland.
Vikings first came to Ireland over 1200 years ago. They mainly came from Norway, but some also came from Denmark and Sweden, an area called Scandinavia. To reach Ireland, they travelled west and went around Scotland. They used big boats called longships to travel across the sea. Could this be a Viking longship? No, it's way too small. This is a replica or a copy of a Viking fishing boat, which were made in a very similar way, just much smaller. Archaeologists can tell by looking at the remains of Viking ships that they were brilliant boat builders and sailors. When the Vikings first arrived in Ireland, many of them were warriors in search of treasure. At this time, churches in Ireland had very beautiful objects made out of gold, silver and amber, just like this artefact here. This is the Arda Chalice, found in County Limerick, and would have been used by priests during the celebration of a Christian Mass. These were the type of objects the Vikings were looking for, so they attacked monasteries with long swords, axes, spears and shields, taking whatever treasure they could find. Archaeologists have discovered if a Viking warrior died in a battle or on a raid, they would be carefully buried with their longsword and other weapons, like these ones discovered in Kilmainham, Dublin. The Vikings believed that after they died, they would travel to Valhalla and meet all of the Viking gods, including Odin, Thor and Freya. Do you think Vikings had horns on their helmets? No, they didn't. In fact, archaeologists have found very little evidence that Vikings even wore helmets. Only one helmet has ever been found. It was discovered in Norway and made of iron. A Viking's favourite metal was actually silver, not gold. Sometimes when Vikings found enough silver or silver coins, they would melt the silver down to make an arm ring or a beautiful brooch, like these ones found in different places around Ireland. Brooches were used to secure cloaks, and arm rings were worn as jewellery on their upper arms. If they wanted to buy something, sometimes they broke off a little bit of silver from an arm ring to pay for it. However, the Vikings didn't always attack monasteries. After a while, archaeologists have discovered they settled in Ireland. They built homes and created towns. They built towns at Dublin, Waterford, Wexford, Limerick and Cork, and over time these grew into the cities we know today. A Viking house was made of wood, straw and mud. They had one big room where all the family lived, and large benches at either side where they slept. In the middle there was a fire, and in the winter time their animals stayed inside. Archaeologists have excavated in Dublin, and they discovered that the town built by the Vikings was very carefully planned and laid out. In fact, some of the streets we still walk down today, such as Fishamble Street and Wine Tavern Street, have been there since the Vikings. Did you know that Dublin was an important centre of travel and trade for the Vikings? They brought walrus ivory and whalebone from Iceland and amber from the Baltic Sea. Amber is fossilised tree resin that hardens over millions of years. The Vikings were also very good at making things. They were great craftspeople. They carved this amber into beads to make bracelets, rings and pendants for necklaces. Dublin was an important place for making objects that people used in their day-to-day lives. Finds from excavations have shown that people used leather to make bags and shoes. In Dublin, archaeologists even found this leather boot that was worn by a child. They also used wood to make barrels, bowls and handles. These were found during excavations at Fishamble Street, and this was carved with Viking animal decoration. They also used animal bones to make objects. They carved deer antler to make this comb. They even used ivory from a walrus to make dice so that they could play games. Do you think the Vikings were well dressed or really scruffy? Excavations and artifacts tell us that clothes were very important to the Vikings and they were well looked after. This is a piece of whalebone from the Viking graveyard in Kilmainham that has been carved into an ironing board plaque, which was used with a glass linen smoother to smooth out and iron clothes. Many women wore a dress and an apron or a pinafore, which they tied with a pair of oval brooches at the shoulders instead of using buttons. Oval brooches like these from Finglas in Dublin were made from a mixture of different metals called copper alloy, and sometimes had silver and gold on them. In between the brooches, they had a string of beads made from glass and amber. Men wore a tunic and trousers made out of wool. They didn't have any zips, so instead wore a belt to hold it up. They carried their objects in small leather pouches on their belt to keep them safe. To conclude, although when the Vikings first came to Ireland, they raided and attacked monasteries, they then settled here, built their homes and towns. Irish people traded with the Vikings in the towns and they started mixing. The Vikings married Irish people and some Vikings became Christians, just like a lot of Irish people were at the time. It's archaeology that has really helped us to piece together this history of the Vikings, from when they arrived to when they settled here. The long-lasting impact of the Vikings is one we still see all around us today. And when walking down the street in many Irish towns, you might be walking where the Vikings walked 1,000 years ago.
In the video, Siobhan told us all about how the Vikings first came to Ireland over 1,200 years ago and started raiding places like monasteries to steal silver and other precious objects. We also learned that the Vikings stopped raiding and started to build their own homes here. Towns and cities like Dublin, Cork, Waterford, Wexford and Limerick started to grow. And these areas became centres of crafting and trade. But when the Vikings weren't raiding, invading and trading, what did they get up to?
Now discover more about how the Vikings entertained themselves on the long, cold, dark nights of winter. Matthew is going to now talk to you about one of the artefacts on display in the Viking Ireland exhibition, the Ballinderry gaming board.
Did you know that the National Museum of Ireland Archaeology has some pieces of board games actually used by the Vikings? Here we can see the beautifully preserved game board from Ballinderry, County Westmeath. This board was found in a crannog, an artificial island built on a lake. Because the site was so waterlogged, the conditions have helped to preserve this amazing object. The gaming board is made from a type of wood called yew, and it's laid out in a grid of peg holes, with the center and corner holes marked off with little circular arcs. It would have been used for the Viking war game Hnefatafl, which we are going to learn lots about later on. The board was discovered during the 1932 excavations at Ballinderry Crannog, a site in use from the late 9th to 11th centuries. This home appears to belong to somebody very important, possibly even a noble or a king. Archaeologists think this because there's a lot of really important objects found here. The board is roughly square and has 49 holes and is decorated around the edges. Do you see the head and carved face? Archaeologists believe this might have been a handle. We also have lots of different die, gaming pieces and counters on display in the Viking Ireland exhibition, which could have been used to play these different games. Some of these beautiful die are made from wood, bone and stone, while others are made of glass and even walrus ivory. I have a couple objects here that some counters and dice might have been made of. Can you guess what this piece might be? We normally see them, or we might see them if we're very, very lucky, on Christmas Eve. They normally grow in pairs. Have you an idea what this might come from? I think you've guessed it. This is antler from a red deer that we have in Ireland. Not quite the reindeer who are pulling Santa's sleigh, but a red deer that the Vikings would have used to make some beautiful pieces to play with. We've also got another really fancy, expensive piece. And this is a lovely, precious stone called jet. The Vikings really loved jet, and you'll see that they've made lots of different objects out of it, like necklaces, and we have some beautiful dice here. Now, the jet and glass and the walrus ivory were very, very expensive, but some pieces, like our antler, they're quite cheap. And it's really, really interesting for us because the Vikings are both buying expensive materials, but they're also being very, very clever, and they're recycling things that they just have around them, which is a brilliant way to be making new and fantastic things to play with. To show you all how to play Hnefatafl, though, I think we're going to need Trisha's help.
We are now going to show you how to play Hnefatafl, but before that, you need a board. We are going to show you how you can make your own board at home. For this, you can view or download the instructions of how to create your board from the museum website. This is available from the Archaeology Engage and Learn pages in Museum at Home. The best thing about this is I bet you have everything at home already to make your own board. Why not try and make your board using spare or leftover cardboard you might have around the house? You can even decorate it with leftover Christmas wrapping paper. Just do be careful when using a scissors and make sure that you have an adult to help you. Once you have your board made, you also need to make some counters. You can decorate these any way that you like. You can even include some Viking symbols such as Thor's hammer, or write your initials in Viking runes. And to find out more about Viking runes, you can use our Viking runes activity sheet from the website. Matthew, you have made some boards. How did you make them? And what does a board look like? How many counters do you need?
Well, here's one I made earlier. I've done this using our instructions, which just like you can tell you step-by-step guidelines on how to make your very own Hnefatafl board. Now, I've designed this to be just like that beautiful board we saw earlier from Ballinderry, County Westmeath. It's got 49 little boxes, so that's a 7x7 grid. And you can see I've colored in the center square and my four corners because they're really, really important when you play. Hnefatafl, sometimes known as King's Table, literally translates as fist table. And the idea is all about protecting your king. So I'm going to show you some of the counters I made. So here we have a Hnefatafl board set out. I've used the instructions that we've created to make our lovely little grid board. Now I've also used some recycled cardboard to make our 8 blue pieces, which are the attacker's army. The center piece here is the most important piece on the board. He is our king, and you can see he's got a little crown. He's got a small army of orange pieces. I've used a little bit of leftover wrapping paper to make them really, really stand out. And the whole idea of this game is our king needs to escape the enemy attackers who've surrounded his army. We're going to need to move him in straight lines. We cannot move diagonally. We need to move across or down and escape to one of these 3 corners. But you can also capture your enemy's piece. So here, the king is trying to get to the corner piece, and you can see his defender is trying to block those blue attackers from getting him. But the blue attackers are able to capture this piece, and they do it by surrounding or flanking him. So if my blue piece here on the corner, if he moves up here, Uh-oh, our defender is surrounded on two sides, so he gets captured. It looks now like the king's going to be in a little bit of trouble.
Yes, it does.
But all of these instructions you can see online, I'll talk you through it. And I think the best way to explore it, make your own board, make your counters, and then have a couple games and see how you can get on, see which one of you in your household is the best at Hnefatafl.
We have taken a look at some of the games that the Vikings played, but did you know that they also had a lot of other pastimes and activities? Some objects are easy enough to recognise as toys and games by archaeologists. For example, this here is a replica of a toy boat that was found in the excavations in Dublin, and the real artefact is on display at the Viking Ireland exhibition here at the museum. Today we are really lucky as we have in front of us some real Viking artifacts from the excavations in Dublin. This artifact here is made from a horse's leg bone, which is close to the horse's hoof. I wonder if you can guess what these were used for. They were actually used in pairs, they were strapped to the bottom of shoes, and they were used during the winter months. This is a Viking Ice Skate. Well done to everyone who guessed correctly. So when they came to make their ice skate, they used the leg bone from a horse because they were very, very durable and pretty much the correct length that they needed for an ice skate. To make the ice skate, they had to trim both ends of the bone, so here and here. And if I turn it around this way, they put a hole in here, and this was used to help strap it to a shoe. If we look at the other side, they also shaped the very front of it into a point, and this again was used to help strap it to a shoe. If we look at the underneath, it is very, very polished so that it could be used as an ice skate and it could easily glide across frozen water. We don't normally think of ice skating when we think of the Vikings, but they would have been very, very important for travelling over frozen water. We're not too sure if these ice skates were really used in Dublin or in Ireland for that matter, as our lakes or rivers don't really tend to freeze over. So it is very likely that these are actually brought over from Scandinavia when the Vikings came. We also have another one down here. So we have a few different ones from the collection. And this one is just slightly smaller, but we can still see that it has a very similar shape and form. Again, we have the pointed top here to help secure it. And if we look here around to the other side again, we can see a hole where it was carved in. And also we can see the polished surface underneath. So this again also helps to tell us that it was used. So it's from use, but also needing to help it to glide a little bit better across the water. And both of these artifacts were found in excavations in Dublin, and both of these are found at Christchurch Place here in Dublin. So when we look at all of these different Viking artifacts, from the Ballandary gaming board, the materials for the gaming pieces, and even these ice skates, what really strikes me is that these artifacts are made from lots of different types of material. The Vikings were very clever to use whatever they had to hand, and also, as many of them are made from animal bone or even antler, they used every part of the animal. So they would have used animals for meat, they would have used their fur for clothing, they used their bones to make things like the ice skates, and they also used bones to make other things like combs and gaming pieces. So even more objects than what we have shown you here today. So far, we have seen some amazing Viking artifacts and learned lots about the different games in the past. Not only did the Vikings love games, but they also love stories.
Deep in the winter, as people gathered around their fires for warmth, stories and sagas would be told. Viking storytellers called skalds would travel around telling tales of gods and monsters, heroes and villains. Many different stories would be told in many different ways about Odin, Thor and Loki, giant beasts and the making of the world. One of my favourite stories, which has been told in many different ways, is about Thor and a frost giant called Thrym. One cold winter morning, Thor wakes up to find that his magic hammer Mjolnir is missing. Thor thinks his trickster brother Loki has taken it. "Loki, where is my hammer?" Loki is frightened of Thor's anger and offers to help find the missing hammer. Borrowing Freya's magical raven cloak, Loki flies across the 9 realms looking for the hammer. As Loki flies across Jotunheim, the land of the frost giants, he sees their king, the giant Thrym. Thrym tells Loki that it was he who stole the hammer, but he will only give it back to Thor if he is allowed to marry the goddess Freya. Loki returns to Thor and tells him what he has discovered. Thor is delighted and he thinks he's going to soon have his hammer back, and he goes to ask Freya to marry the frost giant Thrym. But Freya does not like this idea at all, and she refuses to marry Thrym, even if he is the king of the frost giants. But Loki has an idea. What if we dress Thor up to look like Freya? Thor is very unhappy with this idea, but he really wants his hammer back. With Freya's help, Thor is dressed up to look like a beautiful bride, and he and Loki travel to Jotunheim for the wedding. Thrym is so happy to be marrying Freya that he doesn't realize that it's actually Thor. At the wedding feast, Thor eats lots and lots of food, and Thrym asks Loki if this is normal behavior for the Viking goddess. Loki replies that Freya was so excited to marry the mighty Thrym that she hasn't eaten in days. Thor also drinks 3 whole barrels of mead, and Thrym remarks that Freya must be very thirsty. Loki is quick again, and he tells Thrym that Freya was so eager to marry the king of the frost giants that she has not drunk anything in days. Thrym is getting a little bit suspicious, and he tries to take a peek under Thor's veil, and all he sees are 2 angry eyes looking back at him. Loki is also watching and says that Freya's eyes are red because she hasn't slept in days. So happy was she to be getting married to such a handsome and wonderful frost giant. Thrym thinks, well, I am pretty great, so that does make sense. After the meal, Thrym boasts of his money and riches, and all his most precious items are brought forward to be shown off to his new bride. When the missing hammer Mjolnir is brought forward, Thor leaps up from his chair and picks up his hammer. He rips off his veil and gives a mighty roar across the hall. Thrym is so surprised that he falls backwards off his chair, and Thor and Loki are able to run away to safety with the magical hammer once more.
Thank you all for taking part in today's Christmas workshop, Ragnarok-ing around the Christmas tree. We really hope that you enjoyed it and have lots of fun creating your own Hnefatafl board, learning how to play, and finding out more about Viking pastimes. Don't forget, you can view and download the activity sheet for instructions on how to create your board and also how to play from the museum's website. If you want to learn even more about the Vikings, you can visit the Viking Ireland exhibition when you visit the museum. We also have loads of resources on the website, including a word search, an activity sheet about Viking runes, new videos about the Vikings, archaeology and science, one of which was used as part of today's workshop.
If you enjoyed this event, please do keep an eye out on the museum's website, Twitter and Facebook page for upcoming events. This video is on the museum's YouTube channel and you can watch back at any point. If you like, you can send pictures of your Hnefatafl board to educationarc@museum.ie or by posting on our Twitter using the handle NMIreland or posting on our Facebook page. We hope you all had a lovely Christmas and a happy New Year. Thank you again for joining in today's event and hope to see you all in the museum soon.